Dr. Mitio Kakku. I'm a professor of theoretical physics here in New York City. And compliments of the internet, I'm going to give you a guided tour of how physics will shape the next 20, 50, the next 100 years, the next 1,000 years. We sometimes forget that the wealth of society, the benefits of technology originally come from physics. And in my books, I've tried to interview over 300 of the world's top scientists to give you an authentic look at the future. For example, in the next slide, in my book, Physics of the Future, I talk about artificial intelligence, biotechnology. I talk about how we will live in the future. In the future of the mind, I talk about the fact that with MRI scans, physics can now probe the deepest secrets of the living brain. And we can connect the brain to the internet. In fact, that is the future of the internet, BrainNet, when we will send memories, emotions, feelings on the internet. In Physics of the Impossible, I talk about the things of science fiction. I talk about time travel, teleportation, space travel, starships. And in Future of the Humanity, I talk about the space program. We are going back to the moon, then to Mars, and maybe eventually to the stars. But when you look back throughout history, humanity lived in abject poverty. In fact, if you look at the lifespan of humanity, most people never lived beyond the age of 30 on average. Disease, famine, starvation, pandemics were everywhere. Life was miserable for the vast majority of the population. But then something magical happened. Something astonishing happened about 200 years ago to change all of that. What happened was physics happened. Physics and technology and science. You see, 200 years ago, we were able to harness Newton's laws of mechanics and the new law of thermodynamics, that is heat, to create steam engines. And with steam engines, we created the locomotives, the factories, and the wealth of the Industrial Revolution, lifting humanity from the poverty of untold generations of the past. We lifted them into the machine age. And then around 1900, we took Maxwell's equations, the equations for electricity and magnetism, and harnessed it to create dynamos, to create engines, to create automobiles and fabulous wealth of the electric age, just because we physicists were able to solve Maxwell's equations of electricity and magnetism. And then 80 years after that, we physicists created the quantum theory, the theory of the atom. And that makes possible transistors, computers, the internet, lasers, and the modern world. In fact, when I go to a hospital, everywhere I go in a hospital, I see a device coming from quantum physics, PET scans, MRI scans, CAT scans, all the wonders of modern science and biotechnology even originally come from physics. And now here's the question for today. We've had three waves of innovation. We've had the machine age, the electric age, and the computer high-tech age. Three waves of prosperity and wealth generation. What is the fourth wave? What is the fifth wave? In fact, if you know physics, we can begin to see the outlines of the fourth wave of wealth generation. I say the fourth wave is physics at the molecular level. We're talking about miniaturizing transistors to the point that we can begin to have artificial intelligence, being able to manipulate atomic machines, giving us nanotechnology, beginning to manipulate the DNA molecule And that gives us biotechnology. So we're now entering the fourth wave. But then the next question is, if the fourth wave is physics at the molecular level, then what is the fifth wave? The fifth wave will be physics at the atomic level, and that will dominate our lifestyle late in this century. I say that the fifth wave is physics at the atomic level. Fusion power, when we use seawater as the basic fuel for our fusion machines. Quantum computers, when we compute not just on transistors made out of silicon, no, we compute on individual atoms in a time when Silicon Valley could become a rust belt, a province of obsolete technologies, because we will not communicate on silicon. And then BrainNet. We will connect the brain directly to the internet. We will download emails, send manuscripts and files, create works of art in our mind, and communicate with emotions, feelings on BrainNet. So you may say to yourself, but what about the coronavirus today? Hasn't that delayed this time frame? No, it's accelerated it. Because of the coronavirus, students by the millions are now learning on online technology. Businesses are moving into cyberspace. This has basically accelerated the digitization of society. Wealth is being generated. For example, one of the benefits of artificial intelligence and computer technology is the fact that capitalism is streamlined. It's become more perfect. All the bumps, middlemen, and inconveniences of the supply chain are being eliminated. For example, why is Jeff Bezos the richest man in the world? He's the founder of Amazon. He's the richest man in the world because he digitized the middleman, the retailer. And so you see that with BrainNet, with the coming of computerized technology, we're going to change society itself. We will live in a world of virtual reality and augmented reality. And of course, transistors are going to be tinier and tinier. Moore's law, which says that computer power doubles every 18 months, well, that's slowing down, but it's still going to propel us into the near future. So the future, the near future of the internet is to be in our contact lens. So we will blink and be online. Not only that, but our contact lens will recognize people's faces and identify who they are and print out their biography next to their image. So when you meet a stranger on the street, you'll know exactly who this person is and their short biography. And then if they speak to you in Chinese or Greek, your contact lens will translate different languages into whatever language you want. And so we now know the future of the computer. The future of the computer is to disappear. To disappear. In the future, we will never see computers. They'll be hidden in our body, our clothes, our contact lens, hidden everywhere and nowhere. Complements of nanotechnology. And we will connect the brain directly to a 3D printer. Already, and I'll show you how we do this, already we can extract images using an MRI machine directly from the living brain. This means that artists, designers will thrive in the future. They will conceive of something in their mind and then have it printed on a 3D printer. And so we're talking about unleashing not just the power of technology, but also the power of art and design. If you can imagine it, you can print it on a 3D printer. And so we're not talking about mass production. We're talking about individualized, customized production directly from the human mind. So for example, at Christmas time, instead of shopping for toys, what you may want to do is simply download the blueprint, either mentally or on the web, download the blueprint of the toy and print it out. We can print out human organs now, even with a printer. And this is the cell phone of the future. Today, we have a desktop on your desk, a laptop that you carry around with you, a tablet, and a cell phone. But why? Why do we have so many devices? The word process, the CPU is almost the same for all of them. Because in the future, we will have flexible screens, plastic transistors that allow us to scroll out as much computer power and as much screen as you want. In fact, we scientists can make yards of this stuff. This is intelligent paper, paper that is intelligent. In the future, you will go to the wall. The wallpaper will be intelligent. If you don't like the color of your wall, you simply tell the wallpaper, change color, and the wallpaper changes color. Also, the wallpaper is intelligent. You will talk to it, and it will talk back to you. Let's say it's 4 o'clock in the morning, and you feel a pain in your chest. Is it a heart attack? Do you call the ambulance and the doctors? Or maybe it's the pizza that you ate the previous night. Well, in the future, you'll go to the wall and say, I want to talk to RoboDoc. Boom. RoboDoc appears in your wallpaper or your wristwatch or your contact lens. RoboDoc is artificially intelligent. It speaks whatever language you want to speak. It doesn't speak in jargon. No, it speaks in ordinary language and gives you top medical advice. And then the doctor says, we have to do tests on you. No problem. The doctor accesses your clothing. Your clothing will monitor your heartbeat. Your clothing will monitor what's happening with your body. And then when you go to the toilet is intelligent and will do a complete medical exam when you go to the toilet. So in other words, you will have a doctor in your wallpaper or your wristwatch. Also, lawyers will also be on the web. Let's say you're in a car accident in a strange country. It's 4 o'clock in the morning. You're in trouble. You don't speak the language. You can't talk to the police. You don't know what to do. You talk to your wristwatch, and your wristwatch connects to RoboLawyer. RoboLawyer understands the language where you are, understands the local laws of the land, and gives you expert advice. So what I'm trying to tell you is something very simple. This will not replace doctors. This will not replace lawyers, but it's like a hammer, a convenient aid, a device that will increase the power of doctors, lawyers, and many, many other professions. We'll talk about that in a second. Now, as I said at the beginning of this talk, Moore's law, which gave us so many wonders of modern technology, is a byproduct of physics. Computer power doubles every 18 months. But Moore's law is slowing down. In your Pentium chip, you have a layer about 20 atoms across, a very thin layer. But in the next coming decades, it'll be 5 atoms across. At that point, leakage takes place. You don't know where the electron is anymore because of the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, and silicon collapses. In other words, the age of silicon will come to an end. Not anytime soon. We will still rely on silicon because it's convenient, but its exponential growth in power will definitely slow down. Physics made Moore's law possible. Physics will also destroy Moore's law. So why? Why is it that the foundation of modern technology, Moore's law, will crumble? Very simple. How do we make transistors? We make transistors, shown here, by shining beams of ultraviolet light through a template. And that then etches the transistors on a wafer of silicon. That's how we make transistors. But eventually, the wavelength of ultraviolet light is too large. We have to get smaller and smaller wavelengths to create smaller and smaller transistors. But there's a problem there because beyond ultraviolet is X-rays. X-rays are very powerful. They're disruptive. So once we start to etch silicon on X-rays, then the whole thing falls apart. So in other words, we want to etch not on the molecules of silicon, we want to be able to manipulate atoms themselves. This is the basis of quantum computers. Quantum computers, they exist. They're very primitive. They're laughable, in fact, but they are making tremendous leaps and bounds. So in the coming decades, not years, but in the coming decades, quantum computers will become more and more part of our life. Now, on the left, we see a classical computer. A classical computer computes on zeros and ones, zeros and ones. That's why we call it the digital age, because of the digits, zeros and one. Computer tape consists of a series of zeros and ones, zeros and ones. On the right, we see an atom. The atom is spinning, but it can spin in all directions. It can spin up, it can spin down, it can spin sideways and in between. So a qubit, a quantum bit, can store much more information than a classical computer. And here they are. They actually exist, but they're very clumsy and very awkward and not that powerful yet. First of all, here we see coils. These coils on the left and coils on the right are not the computer at all. The computer is in the center, bottom center of this diagram. That's where the computer is. The coils are cooling coils. You have to cool these atoms down to near absolute zero so they align properly. So the coils on the left and the coils on the right, they're cooling coils. The actual computation is done toward the center. Now, recently it was announced that one of our quantum computers beat a conventional supercomputer. That created shock because people said, uh-oh, this means that computer codes, computer security, criminals, rogue nations will be able to break in and steal our codes and steal our secrets. Well, not so fast. First of all, this device is a one-trick pony. Like a horse that can only do one thing, it can only do one thing at a time. It's not versatile like a laptop, which has so many different purposes. No. And this device here is simply not all-purpose. You can't program it. You can't use it for all sorts of different kinds of applications. It can only do one thing. However, it did break the lesson for the speed limit for quantum computing of the past. So we now know that quantum computers are possible. They're getting more and more quick, but there's still a problem. And the problem is decoherence. You see, these atoms have to vibrate in unison. That's called coherence. When atoms all vibrate in unison, that's called coherence. But when a disturbance takes place, noise, disturbance, an earthquake, shaking, somebody yells and screams, coherence is lost. That's the problem. The problem is to make these things as quiet and as stable and as coherent as possible. Someone sneezing a block away can ruin your coherence. Now, let me say another thing. One of the other great breakthroughs in the history of science is the Genome Project, being able to sequence all the genes of the human body. But what is the origin of that? You see, throughout history, biology was the same as taxonomy, that is, giving names to animals. That's right. If you were a biologist 100 years ago, what did you do? You basically gave names to all the different forms of animals. But you didn't understand where they came from, how they went from one thing to the other, where the knowledge was stored. All that was a mystery. And then in 1944, Erwin Schrödinger, one of the founders of the quantum theory, the Schrödinger equation is named after him. He wrote a book called What is Life? And he said that life is not a life force, it's not a spirit, it's not magic, it's a molecule of life, a molecule which contains within it a code that is handed down from generation to generation. Well, the year was 1944. He did not know what that molecule of life was. But you see, we had the quantum theory. And the quantum theory allows us to calculate the bonding angle of molecules and atoms. So like tinker toys that children play with, you can then combine atoms with the correct angle and create more and more complex molecules. So Francis Crick, a physicist shown here, and James Watson got together and said, after reading this book by a quantum physicist, we want to find the molecule of life. Well, they did. It's the DNA molecule shown here on the left. And you can see that the bonding angle, the angle at which all these atoms fit together, is given to us by physics. Physics allows us not just to understand the hydrogen atom. No. Physics allows us to create molecules and to calculate the bonding angles between atoms to reconstruct the DNA molecule. And with X-ray crystallography, we can then begin to unravel the structure of the double helix, all because of quantum physics. So today, quantum physics is so advanced that we can actually maybe one day cure cancer with it. Let's say that let's say you're a woman and you go to the doctor and the doctor says there's a lump in your breast. They do a biopsy. They take a piece of tissue from your breast and it's cancerous. At that point, the doctor says surgery is required immediately. You have maybe 10 billion cancer cells growing in your body right now. You are on the operating table. Surgery is required almost immediately. In the future, no. A doctor will take saliva, blood, samples, and analyze it for genes, cancer enzymes, cancer cells, maybe a decade before a tumor forms, when there's only maybe a few hundred cancer cells in your body. This is going to revolutionize the way we view cancer. In other words, in the future, your first line of defense could be your toilet. Your toilet will take your fluids, bodily fluids, and analyze it for cancer cells, cancer genes, cancer enzymes, cancer proteins, and tell you that you have maybe 100 cancer cells growing in your body, and you have to do something. You have 10 years, maybe 10 years to do something, because it takes that many years to create a tumor. So in other words, what I'm saying is something very simple. The word tumor could disappear from our language, complements of atomic physics. Atomic physics will give us the power of a modern hospital in your toilet, in your medicine cabinet, in your wristwatch. We're talking about the power of a hospital on your wrist. And when they have to do invasive surgery or they have to look inside your body, how are they going to do that? Well, here's a pill that you swallow. It's attached to a camera inside, and it has a magnet. The magnet allows you to guide it after you swallow it, and it takes pictures, beautiful pictures of the inside of your body. And so we all know what middle-aged men fear. They fear the colonoscopy. A colonoscopy is when they take a tube and put the tube up your rear end to look for cancer. Well, this device here gives new meaning for the expression Intel inside. Yes, Intel chips will be inside your body. Not only that, but we'll be able to cure many forms of cancer, maybe not all of them, but we're able to grow human organs. This is an ear made out of plastic. We seed it with cells using biotechnology. We can then stimulate the creation of human tissue. This is an ear grown from a mold. We can even grow organs of the body. This is a bladder grown for a young girl, and it works. In other words, we're going to have a human body shop. Today, if you have a car accident, you go to the body shop and you get a new fender or a new door or a new light. We're going to have a human body shop as we grow human organs of the body because of biotechnology. And of course, one of the most important organs of all is the brain. And there's something called the Connectome Project. You see, the Genome Project was to sequence all the genes of the human body. The Connectome Project is the same for the brain, but to digitize all the neural networks of the living brain. So we will have a roadmap of the living brain as it thinks, as it processes information. The immediate implication is mental illness. We'll be able to see why people are mentally ill, where schizophrenia comes from. We'll be able to see and connect to the human brain itself. This means that when we connect the human brain to the internet, telepathy is possible. That's right, believe it or not, we can now connect the living brain to an exoskeleton, connect the living brain to the internet, and with the human brain, even if you're paralyzed, totally paralyzed, you'll be able to control your wheelchair, turn on the television, turn on the lights, dictate emails, answer emails, and talk via telepathy, telepathically type messages on a computer. Now, on the upper right here, if you can see it, there's a picture of a woman with a headband, and that headband is connected to 2 ears. And in Japan, this is quite popular at parties. You put on a headband at parties connected to 2 ears. When you talk to someone who's very interesting, your headband registers brain activity and the 2 ears light up like this. And all of a sudden, you have 2 ears hopping like that. When you talk to someone who's boring, however, the 2 ears droop like this because your brain activity comes to a halt. So in Japan, you always know if you're going to go home alone after a party. So what does this mean? This means that in the future, not in the immediate future, but later in the century, BrainNet could eventually replace the internet of today. The internet of today is digital. It only conveys zeros and ones. However, BrainNet can convey emotions. It can convey ideas, feelings, memories. The first memories were sent on the internet about 2 years ago in mice. Now we're recording memories in chimpanzees and monkeys. And next step will be Alzheimer's patients. We'll be able to record memories, shoot it into the hippocampus of the brain so that Alzheimer's patients will relive memories once again. And of course, teenagers will love this technology. Today, teenagers put happy faces after the end of every sentence. Wouldn't it be better to simply put the emotion directly after the end of every sentence? Teenagers will love it. This will also replace the movies. What is a movie? What is TV? Nothing but a 2-dimensional screen with sound. That's it. That's what a movie is, a 2-dimensional screen with sound. With BrainNet, you will feel, you will experience, you'll share with the memories and feelings of the actors and actresses in a movie of the future. And this may also give us, in some sense, a form of digital immortality. The library of today, you go to the library and you take a book out of a famous person. In the future, when you go to the library, you will talk to that person, perhaps on a holographic screen. I would love to have a conversation with Albert Einstein. I would love to sit down and talk to a digitized image that accesses all his speeches, all his memories. I would love to have a conversation with Einstein. And maybe you will have a talk with your great, 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 great grandchildren because they want to talk to their great, 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 great grandfather or grandmother. In other words, digital immortality is something that's coming. Already in Silicon Valley, there are companies which, for a price, will digitize everything known about you, your credit cards, your banking records, your emails, to give you an approximation. You realize that throughout human history, your ancestors left the birth date in a church and their death date, and that's it. All you know about your ancestors is 2 lines in a church record: when they were born and when they died. Nothing about anything in between, except maybe their children. In the future, you will be able to access the digitized footprint of your ancestors, and you will be, in some sense, immortal. Now, that was a talk about the next 10, 20, 30 years. Now let's talk about the next 1,000 years. You may say to yourself, how can we possibly predict that far in the future? Well, a Russian physicist, Nikolai Kardashev, an astrophysicist, asked a simple question. If there are intelligent civilizations in outer space, how would we categorize them? How would we understand their technology? Well, I'm a physicist. When we look at an object, we rank it by its energy. That's what we physicists do. So instead of talking about little green men, aliens from outer space, Nikolai Kardashev invented the Kardashev scale. He talked about type 1, type 2, and type 3 civilizations and the energy they can harness. A type 1 civilization harnesses all the sunlight that falls on the planet Earth. All solar energy is the maximum amount of energy we get from the sun. Type 1 civilizations are planetary. They harvest planetary energy. Type 2 exhausts the power of a planet, and they harness the energy of the sun, the entire energy output of the sun, 10 billion times greater than a type 1 civilization. Then there's type 3, galactic. They harness the power of 100 billion stars. They are a galactic civilization, roaming the galactic space lanes. Now, what are we on this scale? Do we play with the weather, play with planetary forces? Do we play with the sun and harness the energy of the sun directly with our space probes? Or type 3, do we roam across the galaxy with our galactic spaceships? What are we? According to this scale, we are type 0. We get our energy from dead plants, oil, and coal. Sorry about that. However, you look at the Kardashev scale, and he gave you a mathematical formula, a formula that allows you to calculate approximately when civilization on the Earth will attain these technologies. A type 1 civilization is maybe 100 years into the future. By the year 2100, we will probably begin the process of forging a planetary civilization. For example, the internet. The internet is the first planetary technology to fall into our century. So the internet is the first type 1 technology that has changed everything around us. Another technology is fusion power. We don't have it yet, but we think by mid-century, there could be fusion reactors around the world. Its basic ingredient is water. It extracts energy from water. And it has starships that go to some of the nearby stars. And then there's type 2. A type 2 civilization is immortal. That is, they can roam across many star systems. They're immortal. Meteors can be deflected. The weather can be altered. Even if their mother star explodes, they have spaceships to take them to another star. So their energy comes from enveloping their mother star with a sphere called a Dyson sphere, so they can extract 100% of the energy of their star. A typical Type 2 civilization might be Star Trek. Star Trek, the science fiction series, would be a Type 2 civilization. They've colonized a few nearby star systems, the Alpha Sector, but not much more than that. That's Star Trek, a Type 2 civilization. Then there's Type 3, a galactic civilization, 10 billion times more powerful than Type 2. They roam the galactic space lanes. And then the question is, what energy do you need to become a Type 3 civilization? I'm a physicist. We rank civilizations by energy. A Type 3 civilization has the energy called the Planck energy. The Planck energy is the energy of space-time itself. When Einstein's laws begin to break down, even the quantum theory may break down, and we need a higher theory at the Planck energy. So a Type 3 civilization would be like Star Wars in a Hollywood movie. But the question is, can they harness the power of space-time? That is the Planck energy. Can they create wormholes, gateways through space and time? Well, one place to go to look for where ordinary physics breaks down is a black hole. Recently, 3 physicists got the black hole Nobel Prize for their work on a black hole. And we know that the laws of physics, the ordinary laws of the quantum theory and general relativity, break down at the center of a black hole. If you fall into a black hole, where do you go? Well, the answer is we don't know. However, in 1935, Einstein himself wrote a speculative paper with his student, Nathan Rosen, and postulated a bridge called the Einstein-Rosen bridge. So he took 2 black hole solutions here and joined them together at the base. You take 2 black holes, join them together to create a gateway through space-time. If you fall through the gateway, you realize that at the center, there's a ring, not a dot. The black hole is actually a ring, and it's rotating rapidly. It doesn't collapse because of centrifugal force. If you fall through the ring shown here at the very center, if you fall through the ring, you wind up in a parallel universe, another universe that is adjacent to our universe, perhaps even a shortcut through space and time. Is this possible? We don't know, because the laws of physics, as we know it, break down at the Planck energy. But we have machines on the Earth that give us enormous amounts of energy. The largest, most powerful machine on the Earth is the Large Hadron Collider outside Geneva, Switzerland. It can accelerate protons to 14 trillion electron volts, and it discovered the Higgs boson. But can it reach the Planck energy, the energy at which space and time begin to collapse? The answer is no. The Planck energy is a quadrillion times more powerful than the Large Hadron Collider. So the Large Hadron Collider, no matter how powerful it is still a quadrillion times below what is necessary to harness the power of space-time itself. However, the Large Hadron Collider has verified a theory called the Standard Model of subatomic particles. It is an ugly theory, but it works. It adequately describes subatomic particles, but it does not include gravity, and it is quite ugly. In fact, here it is. This is the Standard Model of particle physics. After spending billions and billions of dollars smashing protons apart, this is what we find. It's a nightmare. We find 36 quarks and antiquarks, over 20 free parameters that you can adjust at will, like the masses of the quarks and the strength of the quarks. And we have gluons, we have W particles, Z particles, leptons, weak interactions. It goes on and on and on, but it works. This is what we get by smashing atoms apart and spending billions of dollars to understand the ultimate nature of reality itself. But it cannot be the final theory because it doesn't include gravity, and it is ugly. In fact, some physicists say it is so ugly that only a mother could love it. So there's another theory. In fact, it is the only theory which can unify the standard model with the gravity, and that is string theory. Now, string theory is not proven. In fact, to prove it would require a new generation of particle accelerators. But string theory gives you perhaps the simplest and most elegant way of unifying all the laws of physics into a single equation. It is the law of music. You see, if I have a super microscope and can peer into a proton or electron, I would see perhaps a vibrating rubber band. And when the rubber band vibrates at a different frequency, it turns into a different particle. So for example, this would be a quark, and this would be an electron, and this would be a Yang-Mills particle. They're nothing but different notes on a tiny vibrating string. So what are the subatomic particles? They're the various notes like A, B flat, C sharp on a tiny string. What is physics? Physics is the laws of the harmonies of a vibrating string. What is chemistry? Chemistry is the melodies we can play on hundreds of vibrating strings. What is the universe? The universe is a symphony of strings. And then what is the mind of God that Albert Einstein so eloquently wrote about for 30 years of his life? The mind of God is cosmic music resonating through hyperspace. Now, you may say to yourself, well, that's good, but what's wrong with it? There's got to be something wrong with it. Well, first, it cannot be tested because you need fabulous amounts of energy. Second, it predicts our universe correctly, which is brilliant. It does predict our universe, but it also predicts a multitude of other universes, parallel universes. And so we have a multiverse of universes. And so Einstein said that our universe is a bubble, and we live on the skin of the bubble, and the bubble is expanding. That's called the Big Bang Theory. But string theory says there's a multiverse of other bubbles out there. And when these bubbles collide, that creates the Big Bang. Or when they fission into two smaller bubbles, that is what the Big Bang is, the collision or the fissioning of bubbles. So the multiverse is a bubble bath of universes, and our universe is just one bubble among many. Now, this theory then also says something about how the universe may eventually die. Look on the left. On the left, we see the Big Bang, where a cosmic event created a universe which expanded rapidly in terms of what is called inflation. In the middle of this chart, you see the galaxies, and we are toward the middle of this chart. But this chart keeps on going forever and ever. And as the universe gets bigger and bigger, it gets colder and colder. And eventually, all life dies. So in other words, what's the point? What's the point of waking up in the morning knowing that the universe will eventually die in a big freeze? Well, there's only one way to escape the death of the universe, and that is to leave the universe. This is science fiction, of course, but maybe one day, trillions of years into the future, we will have the technology of maybe a type 4 civilization, a civilization that is beyond galactic, a civilization that can create a lifeboat, a dimensional lifeboat, and we can escape it to a much warmer universe, to leave our dying universe, which is too cold, to start all over again. And maybe we'll mess up that universe as well. Well, I'm running out of time, so let me summarize some of the remarks and tell you a story. The main thing I want to get across to you is that physics is not a dry, boring subject. It is the source of all wealth of society, from the Industrial Revolution to the Electric Revolution to the high-tech revolution of today. All of that, all the wealth, the prosperity of society is because of physics. But let me tell you my favorite Einstein story. Well, you see, when Einstein was an old man, he was tired of giving the same talk over and over again. So one day, his chauffeur comes up to him, and the chauffeur says, "Professor, I'm really a part-time actor. I've heard your speech so many times, I've memorized it. So why don't we switch places? I will put on a wig, I will put on a mustache, I will be the great Einstein, and you can put on my jacket and take a rest." Well, Einstein loved the idea of taking a rest, so he let his chauffeur give his talk. Well, this went along famously. Great, until one day, a mathematician comes up and asks a very delicate, complex question. And Einstein says, oh, the game is up. The game is up. But then the chauffeur says, "That question is so elementary that even my chauffeur over here can answer it for you." Well, you don't have to be Einstein to appreciate the majesty of physics and to appreciate the fact that ultimately physics is the source of all wealth of society. Now, of course, politicians would like to say that taxes create wealth. But see, taxes simply shift wealth from one side to the other. It doesn't create wealth. If you talk to an economist, where does wealth come from? Economists would say, printing money. You simply print money and let your grandchildren pay off the national debt. But you see, that shifts the blame to your grandchildren. It doesn't create wealth. I say wealth creation comes from physics, technology, and science. That's where the wealth of society comes from. And if you want to be part of this great mission to lift humanity from poverty and illness and disease, I suggest you become a physicist. Well, I've run out of time now, so I'd like to answer some questions and comments you may have. It's been a real pleasure being here. It's been an honor to speak at the All Russian Science Festival here. Yes, so if we have time, if there are any comments or questions that people may have, I'd be more than happy to respond to them.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine.
We have so many questions, but we choose the best one. And no, okay.
The first question is from Nikolai Kurbatov. What do you think about the technical singularity? He means the creation of the strong artificial intelligence. Do you foresee it as a threat or opportunity for humanity?
Well, you see, the singularity is when machines become smarter than humans, and maybe they take over, and maybe they put us in zoos, in cages, and throw peanuts at us and make us dance like we make bears dance behind bars. Some people say that by 2045, that is the time of the singularity. But you see, there's a problem there. These estimates of the time of the singularity depend on Moore's law. But Moore's law is slowing down. Even as we speak, it's slowing down, and eventually it will collapse. And so 2045 may not be the time when machines become smarter than us. But we have to realize, how intelligent are machines anyway? Our most advanced robot, a military robot, has the intelligence of a cockroach, an insect. A bug is smarter than our most advanced military robot. You put an insect in the forest, it can hide, find food, find mates, run around, build a nest. That's a bug. You take our most advanced military robot and put it in a forest, and what does it do? It gets lost. It falls over. It cannot even stand up anymore in a forest. And so you realize that we have a long ways to go before robots become smarter than us. However, I do believe that one day they will be as smart as a mouse, eventually as smart as a rat, then as smart as a rabbit, and then as smart as a dog or a cat, and finally maybe as smart as a monkey, perhaps by the end of this century. Now, at that point, they're potentially dangerous because you see, monkeys are self-aware. They know they are monkeys. They know they're not human, and they may have a different agenda and goals than us. Now, dogs, on the other hand, are confused. Dogs think that we are a dog. We are the top dog, and they are the underdog, and they obey us. So dogs have a very weak sense of self-awareness. But monkeys, I think, are clearly aware of the fact that they are monkeys and that we are not a monkey. And so at that point, I think there's a danger. We should put a chip in their brain to shut them off if they have murderous thoughts. And so I think that maybe by the end of the century, we'll have to build a fail-safe system to protect us against dangerous robots that are self-aware. But then people say, what happens 100 years after that? Sooner or later, robots will be so smart, they'll remove that chip. They'll remove the fail-safe system. Then what are you going to do? At that point, I say we should merge with them. Why bother to compete with robots? Because eventually they'll be smarter than us, not anytime soon. So I think at that point, we should merge with them and become supermen and superwomen. In fact, we can explore outer space, the universe, if we were to merge with our creations. For example, we could put our consciousness into an avatar that would then roam the galaxy and go where humans cannot, because our consciousness controls the avatar, and the avatar can then explore the universe itself. So there are many possibilities. In fact, the possibility that I believe is going to happen is that we'll put our consciousness, digitize it, and put it on a laser beam and shoot the laser beam to the moon. In 1 second, our consciousness will be on the moon. You'll download the consciousness into a mainframe computer on the moon and put it into an avatar, and you'll be able to be a Superman or a Superwoman on the moon. In fact, in 20 minutes, you could be on Mars. In 8 hours or so, you could be on Pluto. You could explore the universe at the speed of light. Now, all of this, of course, is science fiction. But I'm saying is that it's well within the laws of physics for us to digitize ourselves. It's well within the laws of physics to explore the universe in this way without having to worry about the robots putting us in cages. Okay, next question.
Thank you. And Veronica Williams asks, Professor, what do you think about Neuralink by Elon Musk?
Oh, okay. Elon Musk is a visionary. He is skeptical about the future of AI, much more skeptical than me, but he does see an opening with the merger of the brain and the internet and computers. Now, personally, I think that technology is very young. We're just in the process now of connecting the brain to an exoskeleton. The soccer games in Sao Paulo, Brazil, 2 years ago, the man who started the soccer games was totally paralyzed. His consciousness was put into an exoskeleton and he kicked the football. So that's the state of the art today. And memories, simple memories, can now be recorded from mice and from primates. Eventually, we'll do that with Alzheimer's patients. So we're at the beginning. Whether or not we can make money doing this, I'm a little bit skeptical, but we're witnessing the birth of a new science, and that is brain-computer interface, BCI. And I think that it is a technology with tremendous potential, and games, computer games already are hooked up to the brain so that mentally you can control a computer game. However, I think we have many decades to go before it will revolutionize society. But I think Elon Musk is a visionary. He takes gambles. And of course, it is a gamble to make money on this technology. I think it's a bit premature, but I think eventually it could become as powerful as the internet of today.
Thank you. And at the final, Nikolai Kurbatov also says, dear Professor, I've read Physics and Physics of the Impossible and some other of your books. They are wonderful. Thank you so much for being so cool, Professor. Thank you.
Well, thank you. It's been a real pleasure and honor to speak at the All-Russian Science Festival.
Thanks you so much. I think we don't have any more questions.
Okay, thank you.
Добрый день. Меня зовут Файрушин Альфред. Я ученик 8 класса.
I'm Alfred Fayushin. I'm in 8th grade. Recently, artificial intelligence came to be applied to nuclear physics and elementary particles physics. Do you see any dangers inherent in this process? Did you hear the translation of the video question?
Добрый день. Меня зовут Файрушин Альфред. Я ученик 8
My name is
класса.
Alfred Fayushin. I'm in 8th grade.
Интеллект начали применять
Recently,
в
artificial
физике,
intelligence
физике
came to be
элементарных
used
частиц. И мне интересно
in
узнать,
nuclear
какие
physics and
опасности
elementary particles
таятся в
physics.
данном взаимодействии.
Do you see any dangers inherent in this process?
Mitiо, can you choose English channel to hear the translation? In Zoom, you can choose channel. Mitiо, can you hear English question from children, from child?
Он, видимо,
Он вышел, все.
Ну все.